Hello everyone! I've started a series of artist trading cards and I'm getting a lot of questions about my process. These are simple collage, they're easy to do, and very entertaining. These are artist trading cards, which means they're 3.5 by 2.5 inches. But this project can be done in any size. They can even be done with full figures. So my process is simple. Collect heads and figures. Number 2, fussy cut the images. And number 3, matching the heads with the figures. So my step 1 is collecting the figures. I find shoulders or bodies, figures in fashion magazines, People magazine, National Geographic, advertisements, catalogs, old yearbooks, copies of family photos. You get printed photos of the kids or old family photos or even found photos. Children's books, art books, museum books, statues work really, really well. So I'm looking for shoulders that aren't really cut off. I'm looking for different clothes, suits, formal dresses, costumes, t-shirts. I look for drawings, for paintings, statues. I look for black and white and color. I even found these shoulders in some scrapbook paper. So when I'm looking for shoulders, I look for shoulders, but if you're looking for full figures, something like this might not work. Heads can be anything, human, animals, or objects. So animals, birds, reptiles, insects. It helps if they have an upright neck, but there are ways around if you find something that doesn't. I like to leave the neck with the animals just because it gives me options for later. Sometimes I cut them off and sometimes I use the neck from the head. So I have a lot of dogs. Advertisements for dogs are easy to find and they're really cute. So I have different kinds of animals. This is a crocheted teddy bear. There's cartoons. There's wrapping paper, drawn. This is a die cut. Illustrations, different types of animals. I collect all of those things. Animals are pretty easy to find. Objects like food, flowers, cars, coins, houses. I consider everything. Think outside the box. And I actually do have a box head on one of mine. So there's a bunch of different things in here. I like to put my heads on trays, and then, because I have so much, I can scooch them around and try to find something. So human, you can find whole heads. I like whole heads that are interesting, with hats. I like whole heads that are drawn or they've got a funny face or something like that. They're painted funny. You don't have to use the whole head. You can use parts of faces. Here is a square-ish face. Here's a squared face. A circle. This, I cut the face out. This is almost a full face, but not quite. These work really well, and I'll show you later. And it doesn't have to be the whole face. It can be just part of the face too. I like heads that are drawn, statues, object faces like dolls, statues, that kind of thing. Famous artwork really works well. And here's one, same one, kind of gives you a different perspective if you fussy cut it out or you use it as a square like that. So you can use drawings, cartoons, famous artwork, statues. The object of the game is to find as many different types. You want a variety. So when you start mixing and matching things together, you have options. You want some contrast. Collect as much as you can in as many different sizes as you can. Different styles. You need a variety. My step 2 is fussy cutting. Fussy cutting is important. The heads should be separate from the background. It makes them look more real. I fussy cut everything before I start matching anything because it's more fun. I don't have to stop and fussy cut things out. I do try to keep the necks intact on figures and heads when possible, so I have more options later. And when I'm talking about fussy cutting, you can really fussy cut the heads out, or you can use squares or parts of faces. It works this way if you use just a part of the face, but the head really should be separate from the background. It's more convincing that way. It can be parts of faces, parts of animals, circles, squares, all of those things work. But fussy cutting is really is important. Here is a square-ish of a cat, and it works. And here I used a piece of artwork. I matched up the shoulders from this rectangle, and it works well enough. So you don't absolutely have to fussy cut everything, but I recommend fussy cutting. At least make your heads separate from the background. That is the most important. Okay, and step 3 is matching. This is the fun part, you guys. I keep the heads on trays so I can move them around. I can move the tray closer. Let me get this figure out here because it's one that I've been working with. It's not a full figure. I haven't cut it off yet because I'm not sure exactly where I want it yet. So I find an item that I want to mess around with, something that I really like. It's either a figure or a head, and then I start auditioning. And I try to pick as much stuff as I possibly can. I get my tray out and I scooch things around and I pick out a bunch of stuff that I think might work. Let me add just a few more just for the fun of it. Let's get some objects out there. I love this part. This is the best part ever. So, you know, you never know if something's going to work unless you try it. And then when I laugh out loud, I know that I have something. So I try a bunch of different things. That actually, I've been trying to find a shoulders for that nest for a long time. Obviously, a lot of these work. Most of them work. Some bodies and shoulders are much easier than others. Some can be a little bit more difficult. This one has a bit of a neck I left on there, and I left it so that I could judge where I might want the neck, or even if I want to use the neck of this head or use the neck of the figure. So I have options. I can use either one. Here's a planet. This one's one of those that a lot of these options work. And I do come across that quite a bit. What I do is I take photos, and then I have a digital copy of all of them. And I don't have to choose. I just don't glue some things down. I just make digital copies. See, I love this one and the typewriter. I can't choose. I'm having a really hard time making a final decision because so many of these actually work. So that's what I recommend. Take a photo. You have a digital copy. You can post those on Instagram or wherever. It is an option not to glue them together and just to have like a paper doll set to play with, because this is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. See, this, some heads go with everything and some bodies go with everything. You'll be amazed at the options that you have. So I am making artist trading cards. I'm not doing full figures. And that's why I have not cut off this part. Obviously, I'm not going to want all this down here because I need to know the size. And I work on little bits of card, so I know how much room I have to work with when I am putting these together. When I decide on something, put it together, and then I will cut it off. So the other thing that I do is once I figure out what I want, I need to find a background. Now, if you're working on full figures and they've got their own little backgrounds, this is not really important. But if you're doing something like this, you need to find a background that you can still see your figure on. Sometimes if they're too busy, you lose, well, you lose it. Sometimes if they're too dark or they're too light, you really have to audition backgrounds as well. I have had problems if I have found a dark head, light body. Sometimes it's hard to find a background where the head hasn't disappeared or the body hasn't disappeared. You don't want a headless something. You don't want the head to disappear in the background. So I mess around until I find just the right something, a contrast. Like that does not really work. So, and that's what I am doing because I am doing a specific size. I have that size out here so I can put them together as I find them. And then I can take a picture and go on to the next one and take a picture of that one. So I have my digital copies. Here are some tips and tricks. Necks are important. The transition from the shoulders to the head needs to look real or natural. I use either the neck from the head or the shoulders. I don't fuse them together. So here's one where I've used the body, neck, and I do move them up and down, make a long neck or a shorter neck. It's fun to play around with that. And here's one where I've used the neck of the animal head. You really need to size the neck so it looks natural when it's coming out of the shoulders. This one I think I had to trim down just a little bit just so that it would be just the right size. But I don't put both necks together and fuse them. Sometimes you don't really need to see the neck. Sometimes it works. If you've got a head and it looks more like a chin and it disguises that fusion, it looks better. Here's another one I had to trim very closely to make it look natural. This one was really difficult. In fact, it was only part of a head. It was cut off, but you don't really notice that so much. What you really notice is how the neck comes out of the shoulders and if it works or not. So you can use reptiles, things that don't have a neck really. You can use them, but they can be a little tricky. This is what I did to disguise him. Since he really didn't have a neck, I kind of made it look like it's an illusion. So necks are really important. So number 2, I really like to think of these like people as posing for a portrait. Let's get her back out here. And so what do people do when they're posing for portraits? They tilt their heads. They have attitude. So don't always put them straight on. You can tilt them a little bit. Make them pose. Give them some attitude. It makes them more fun, more interesting. All right. Number 3, size matters. When I'm doing these artist trading cards, I do like to size up to see how much space I have left. If I were to put a little head on that, even if it wasn't an artist trading card, that would look, it's just not right. It just does not look right. Bigger is better. I like the bigger heads on them instead of little heads. They just look more natural. It's a lot more fun. I love giant heads on tiny little bodies. It's hilarious. But it doesn't really work with smaller heads and big bodies. It just, something about it just doesn't work very well. Number 4, you want the pieces to have contrast. You want a drawn head on a photograph. It's more interesting instead of putting a photograph on a photograph, a person's head on a person's body. You want something that's not expected. You want color with black and white. You want large with small. You want drawn with real, cartoons. You know, you want a contrast. You want it to be different. You don't want something that you can go outside and take a picture of. Another one is your heads should face the same direction as the torso. It looks better. If you get the head looking backwards, it doesn't look quite right. So heads should be facing the same way as your torsos do. So this is a really fun project for everyone. If you would like to see more examples, check out the show and tell video I have on my channel. Please like, subscribe. It really helps me out. And click the notifications so you know when I've posted a new video. Thanks for watching.